Hunger, ice, and death at minus 40 degrees Celsius. This was not a nightmare. This was the daily reality for millions of German civilians in the winter of 1945, the war's last winter, the cruelest winter, the winter that would test the very limits of human endurance. The city of Berlin had become unrecognizable. Where grand boulevards once bustled with life, now only skeletal ruins remained, their jagged silhouettes cutting against a sky perpetually gray with smoke and snow. The famous Unter den Linden was buried beneath mountains of rubble, and the once proud buildings stood like wounded giants, their facades torn open to reveal frozen kitchens and bedrooms exposed to the elements. Margareta Vogler stood at what remained of her apartment window, watching the snow fall in thick, relentless curtains. She was 53 years old, though the past months had aged her decades. Her face had grown gaunt, the cheekbones sharp beneath papery skin. Her hands, which had once played Chopin with such grace, were now cracked and bleeding from chilblains. She had not played piano in 7 months. The piano itself had been burned for firewood in November. "Margaret," came a weak voice from the bedroom. "Margaret, is that you?" She turned from the window, pulling the threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Yes, Mother, I'm here. I'm coming." In the bedroom, her mother Ilse lay buried beneath every blanket and coat Margaret had managed to salvage. At 78 years old, Ilse had survived the Great War, the influenza pandemic, and the hyperinflation of the 20s. But this winter, Margaret feared, might finally claim her.
The blue dress.
"I dreamed
at the
of your
fair,
father,"
He was there,
Ilse
waiting.
whispered,
Shh.
her breath forming small
I'm here.
clouds in the
I
frigid
won't
air.
leave.
He was standing in the garden in Potsdam, the one with the roses. "Remember the roses, Margaret?" Margaret remembered. She remembered summer afternoons that seemed to last forever. That house had been bombed in 1943. The garden was now a crater filled with frozen debris. He said to hold on. He said the winter would pass. Outside, the wind howled through the broken buildings like a chorus of the damned. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the rumble of artillery, a sound that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. The front was getting closer. Everyone knew it. No one dared say it. Margaret looked around the apartment that had once been her sanctuary. The walls were cracked, the windows mostly boarded up with whatever she could find. Old newspapers, pieces of furniture, scraps of cloth. The beautiful wallpaper she and Friedrich had chosen together in 1925 was now stained with water damage and covered in soot from the makeshift stove they had fashioned from an old metal barrel. Everything that could be burned for fuel had already been consumed. The bookshelves her father had built as a wedding gift, gone. The antique chairs that had belonged to Friedrich's grandmother, gone. Even the frames of family photographs had been sacrificed to the endless hunger of winter. Only the photographs themselves remained, carefully stored in a metal tin beneath the floorboards. She thought about the woman she had been before the war, a music teacher with a comfortable life, a loving husband, a warm home filled with laughter and the smell of coffee and fresh bread. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone from a dream she could barely remember. The food distribution center on Alexanderplatz had once been a department store famous for its Christmas displays. Now it served a different purpose entirely. Margareta had been standing in line since 4 a.m. It was now past 9, and she had moved perhaps 30 meters. The cold was so intense that her eyelashes had frozen together. Around her, hundreds of women waited in similar misery, bundled in layers of curtains, tablecloths, newspapers stuffed beneath their coats. Their faces were uniformly gray, their eyes hollow. No one spoke. Speaking required energy, and energy was a currency more precious than the worthless Reichsmarks. Margaret's ration card entitled her to 300 grams of bread per week and a small portion of potatoes. This was meant to sustain 2 people. She had done the mathematics countless times, always arriving at the same impossible conclusion.
They're saying it's the last batch.
It was not enough.
Not enough for
3 women
everyone.
ahead of her, an argument broke out. One woman was accusing another of cutting the line. The accused, a younger woman with a prominent belly, pregnant, Margaret realized, stood her ground. "I've been here since 3, the pregnant woman said, her voice cracking. "The baby needs—" "We all need," the other interrupted. "My husband died at Stalingrad. My son died in Normandy. You think your baby matters more than my dead?" The pregnant woman began to cry, silent tears that froze on her cheeks. No one came to her defense. There was simply nothing left. No compassion, no energy, no capacity for anything beyond the next breath. 2 hours later, Margaret reached the front. The bread they gave her was more sawdust than flour, gray and smelling faintly of mold. There was no meat, no butter, no milk. As she stepped outside, she heard the civilian defense sirens begin. A loudspeaker crackled to life. Citizens of Berlin, the enemy advances from the east. The Führer has declared that Berlin will be defended to the last man. Margaret hurried home, the bread already hardening in the cold. On her way, she passed the remains of a church where she had once attended Christmas services with Friedrich. The steeple had collapsed in December, crushing the altar where they had said their vows. She didn't stop to look. There was nothing left to see. At the corner of Friedrichstrasse, she encountered a group of women pulling a cart laden with belongings. Refugees from the Eastern Territories, she assumed, fleeing the approaching front. Their faces told stories of horrors she could only imagine. One of them, a woman about her own age, met her eyes briefly. In that glance, Margaret saw exhaustion, fear, and something else, a fierce determination to survive that she recognized in herself. She wanted to stop, to offer help, but she had nothing to give. The bread in her arms was meant for 2 people who were already starving. So she lowered her gaze and kept walking, hating herself for her helplessness. The apartment building where Margareta lived had once housed 12 families. Now only 4 remained. On the second floor lived Herr Zimmermann, a former accountant in his 60s whose wife had died of pneumonia in December. On the third floor was Frau Müller, a nurse who still reported to the hospital each day despite the fact that there were no medicines left. And on the 4th floor lived the Hartmanns, Otto and Gerda, both in their late 40s, whose 3 sons had all been killed in the war. As Margareta climbed the stairs, she found Frau Müller sitting on the landing, her eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. "I lost 12 today," Frau Müller said flatly. "We had nothing to give them, no morphine, no bandages. I held their hands and watched them die, and do you know what the last one said? He thanked me. He thanked me for being there. Then he asked if his mother was coming." She laughed bitterly. "His mother has been dead for 3 years." Margaret sat beside her, taking the nurse's hand.
They're organizing
2 women on a frozen stairwell in a dying city,
No, I can't leave.
waiting
There's
for the
nowhere for me
end.
to go now.
"I heard they're evacuating civilians
We must go now west.
Frau Müller said. "Trains
Can
to
she
Hamburg,
travel?
anywhere away
No.
from the Russians."
I won't leave her.
Margaret thought of her mother, too frail to travel. "We can't leave." "None of us can, so we stay, and we wait." Back in the apartment, Margaret turned on the radio, keeping the volume low. The official broadcasts were nothing but propaganda now, tales of miraculous victories, of secret weapons. No one believed them
Superior forces are
anymore.
unbreakable.
Tonight, however, the broadcast was different. The situation in the east has reached a critical point. Soviet forces have crossed the Oder River at multiple points. The Oder River. That was barely 80 kilometers away. Margaret turned off the radio and stood at the window, watching the snow fall. For the first time, she allowed herself to think the unthinkable. This was the end. "Margaret?" Her mother's voice came from the bedroom, surprisingly clear.
Amelia,
"I heard the
are you
radio.
there? I need
We
you.
need to talk
Hurry.
about what comes
Amelia,
next."
I need you. I
Ilse
can
was
see you.
sitting
Come
up,
closer.
more alert than she had been in days. "I'm not afraid to die," she said. "I've lived a
I
long
heard.
life. But you,
I'm ready.
you still have years ahead.
You must
When the time
live.
comes, I want you to
must live,
survive.
no matter the cost.
Whatever it
Promise me.
takes.
Oh,
Promise me."
I promise.
The tears Margaret had been holding back for months finally broke
I
free.
will do it, Mother.
"Promise
I
me,"
promise.
Ilse repeated.
Yes.
"I promise,"
You must.
Margaret whispered. "Here we tell the stories that history tried to bury, the real human experiences behind the headlines. If you want to understand what ordinary people endured when the world fell apart, subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter. 3 days later, Ilse's condition worsened. The cough that started small had deepened into something wet and rattling. By the 3rd day, she could barely sit up, and her forehead burned with fever. Margaret knew what she needed: medicine. But the pharmacies had been emptied months ago. The hospital had nothing to spare, which left only one option. The black market operated in the shadows, moving from location to location. It was where one could find food, medicine, fuel, for a price. The currency was not Reichsmarks, but goods, jewelry, art, anything of value. Margaret had one thing left, her wedding ring. Friedrich had placed it on her finger in the summer of 1920. He had died in 1942, his heart giving out in his sleep. She had worn the ring every day since, touching it in moments of weakness as a reminder that she had once been loved. Now she slipped it from her finger. The black market's current location was in the basement of a bombed-out church near Potsdamer Platz. The temperature was -32, cold enough to kill within minutes if one stopped moving. The streets were crowded with ghosts, the ruins of shops, frozen corpses that no one had energy to bury, abandoned vehicles. Near the Tiergarten, Margaret saw her first Soviet aircraft, its red star clearly visible. No one shot at it. Everyone understood that resistance was merely prolonging the inevitable. In the church basement, lit by candles, perhaps 50 people conducted the commerce of survival. Margaret found the medicine vendor, a thin man with round spectacles who had once been a pharmacist.
Be careful
Pneumonia,
with this.
she said.
It's potent.
My mother is 78. He named his price, gold. Wedding rings were acceptable. Margaret produced the ring. It caught the candlelight, gleaming with memories. This will cover
This
the
covers
sulfa and
sulfa
aspirin,
and
he
aspirin,
said.
but the tincture
For the
requires
tincture,
more.
I'll need
But
something
I have
more.
nothing else.
Margaret
Please.
had nothing more.
Please, sir, I beg
Please,
you,
it's
she's
all I have.
dying.
My mother
I'm
is
afraid
dying.
I cannot help you.
I'll cover the difference.
Perhaps I
The
can
voice
cover the
came from
difference.
behind her. A man roughly her own age, tall and thin, but with clothes of better quality than most. You don't know me, Margaret said, suspicious.
I don't know you.
No, but I knew your
I
husband.
know you. I'm here to
Friedrich
help.
Vogler? He was my professor at the university. Music theory.
I knew your
1934.
husband, Friedrich.
The man
He was my
smiled
student at the
sadly.
university.
Professor
Music theory,
Vogler was patient with me.
1934.
He used to say that music was the one language that required no translation.
Friedrich said
I'm
music
Wilhelm
was
Brandt.
one language.
What do you
Requiring
want?
no translation.
Only the satisfaction of
mother.
repaying an old kindness. It would shame his memory if I let his widow's mother die for want of medicine.
Thank you.
He produced a silver cigarette case. The pharmacist accepted it, and the exchange was complete. Outside, Margaret turned to thank him, but Wilhelm Brandt was already walking away, disappearing into the snow like a ghost. She never saw him again. The medicine worked. Within 3 days, Ilse's fever had broken. Within a week, she was able to sit up and take solid food. On the 10th day, Ilse was strong enough for
What
real
happened at the
conversation.
market? I want to know everything.
Tell me about the market,
I'm sorry,
she said.
I couldn't get what we
Tell me
needed.
everything.
There wasn't enough.
Margaret
I
hesitated,
traded
then
it,
admitted,
Mother.
I traded Friedrich's ring. She expected
I
tears.
know, my love.
Instead, Ilse
It's
simply
all
nodded.
right.
Good.
He loved
Your
me
husband
more
loved you more than any object. A ring is a symbol, Margaret.
But
The love
true
it represents
lives
lives here. She touched her chest. And here,
Love lives there.
she touched Margaretta's
You
heart.
made the right choice.
You made the right choice. They sat in silence. The only sounds the wind outside
Look at the
and the
night, my
distant
dear.
rumble of artillery.
Peaceful,
Do you
isn't it?
remember the turnip winter of
Take comfort in
1917?
this.
Ilse asked.
Do you know of the
Your
turnip
father
winter
nearly
of
died.
1917?
We had nothing but turnips and thin
My
soup.
father nearly died.
but he survived.
Nothing but turnips.
We
and
survived.
soup. After the war,
And the war
we
ended.
rebuilt.
And there was peace.
We had Margaret.
And we rebuilt our
and
lives.
25 beautiful
We had you.
years. Yes,
we had
there was
25
hope.
years of happiness. She
Difficult
squeezed
times
Margaret's
pass.
hand.
Survivors
This too will
rebuild.
pass.
This is
And
the
whoever
nature of our
survives will
resilience.
rebuild.
Inherit this
That is what
strength.
humans do.
How can you be so
How
certain?
can you be so certain?
I have faith in people.
Because I have faith in
in
people.
their capacity,
in their
to,
capacity
endure,
to
to find
endure.
light, faith
to find
in my
light in the
daughter.
darkness. In you, my dear.
My
If these words
dear.
touched something in your heart,
I
if
have
you've ever
faith in
faced a
you.
winter of your own and found the strength to
Oh,
keep going,
Mother.
leave a comment telling us, I survived my winter. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs today. By mid-March, the residents of the building had made a collective decision. They would weather the final storm together. The cellar beneath the building became their bunker, their shared home, as the world above them shattered. Margaret and Herr Zimmermann dragged mattresses down the narrow stairs, found candles in abandoned apartments. Frau Müller contributed bandages stolen from the hospital. Gerda Hartmann proved to be a surprising asset. Before the war, she had been a chef at one of Berlin's finest hotels. My grandmother survived the siege of Paris in 1870, she said, stirring a pot of thin soup. She said the secret was seasoning. If you season something well enough, you can convince your stomach it's being properly
I
fed.
remember.
Ilse
Berlin
became the
before
cellar's
wars.
storyteller,
The
keeping everyone's
jazz, the
spirits up
cabarets.
with
I
tales
met
of
my
Berlin
husband at a
before the
dance.
wars.
And the music
jazz
played
clubs,
until the
the
sun came up,
cabarets, meeting
and
her
we
husband at a
danced
dance
like
where
there
the
was
orchestra
no
played
war.
waltzes until dawn.
Do you remember?
And in the darkness, something remarkable happened. They became a family, not by blood, but by circumstance and choice. They developed routines to maintain sanity. Herr Zimmermann, despite his grief, organized a system for rationing water and food. Frau Müller checked everyone's health each morning, watching for signs of frostbite or infection. Otto Hartmann, who had been a carpenter before the war, took his sons and his spirit, repaired what he could with salvaged materials. In the evenings, they would gather around a single candle to conserve supplies,
In Berlin,
and Ilse
it was
would tell
glorious.
her stories.
The Adlon
She
Hotel.
spoke of the Berlin she
We
had known
danced
as a
all
young
night.
woman,
I wore a
the
blue
grand
dress.
balls
It
at
was
the
a
Adlon
lifetime
Hotel,
ago.
the opera performances that lasted until midnight, the cafes where intellectuals debated philosophy over cups of coffee that seemed impossibly luxurious now.
I remember
We
a
thought we were
time
so
when we thought we
civilized,
were so
she
civilized.
said one night, her
that
voice
we had
soft with
conquered
memory.
barbarism forever.
We thought we had conquered barbarism
We are not
forever.
animals.
And
Animals
look at us
don't
now,
share food with strangers.
hiding in a cellar like
we
animals,
tell stories to
praying
keep
for
hope
survival.
alive. We are
We are not
humans.
animals,
No one
Margaret
has to
replied
face this
firmly.
alone.
Animals don't
Choosing
share their
to
food
stand
with strangers.
together is what defines
Animals don't tell
us.
stories to
It's
keep
the most
hope alive.
human thing we can
Animals
do.
don't choose to face darkness together when they could flee alone. In that moment, looking at the faces around her illuminated by candlelight, Margaret understood something profound. This was what it meant to be human. Not the grand achievements of civilization, the symphonies and the cathedrals and the scientific discoveries, but this. The simple choice to care for one another when caring demanded everything you had. Late one night, there was a knock at the cellar door. Everyone froze. Visitors meant danger, soldiers looking for deserters, or worse.
Please, I need
Please, came a female voice, weak and desperate. Please, I need help. They opened the door to find a woman barely standing, her clothes torn and blood-stained. Her name was Renate, a librarian from the university. They burned them, she said, tears streaming. The soldiers, our own soldiers. They said nothing of value could fall into enemy hands, so they burned the library. Hundreds of years of knowledge turned to ash. She had fled through the chaos, driven by nothing but the instinct to survive. You're safe
Don't worry,
now,
you're safe here.
Margaret
Come inside
told
with
her,
us, your family
though
now.
she knew the words were a lie.
Thank you.
With Renate's arrival, the cellar's population grew to 8 people, and the supplies that had seemed adequate suddenly felt painfully insufficient. There's another option, Otto Hartmann said quietly at a meeting. Some of us are more likely to survive than others. If the elderly reduced their rations voluntarily, no, Margaretta's voice was firm. We all eat equally, or we don't eat at all. The moment we
all
start
eat
calculating
equally,
human
or we
worth,
don't eat at
we
all.
become like them, like the people
There
who
is no
started this
human
war.
worth to calculate.
Otto looked at her for a long moment,
The moment we
and
start
something seemed
calculating
to break in
human
his
worth,
eyes. You're
we
right.
become like them,
I'm
like
sorry.
the people who
They
started
decided to
this
forage
war.
in pairs during the quietest hours, sharing risk and reward equally. If this story is making you feel something, please hit the like button. And if you know someone who loves history, share this video with them. Every like and share helps us continue telling these important stories. April arrived, and with it, the final battle for Berlin. The sounds were constant: artillery, machine guns, aircraft, explosions marking the street-by-street advance of the Soviet forces. In the cellar, they felt the vibrations through the earth itself. They stopped trying to keep track of time. Days and nights blurred into a single continuous present. On the 20th of April, the cellar received its first direct hit. Margaret woke to chaos. Dust choking the air, screaming, falling debris. Mother! She scrambled through the darkness. Mother, where are you? Here, I'm all right. Part of the ceiling had collapsed where Renate had been sleeping.
Mama!
They dug her out together, battered but breathing, her arm broken.
Help me,
That
please!
night, Margareta
Mama,
climbed to the
where
ground
are
floor and
you?
looked outside. The street was unrecognizable. Fires burned unchecked. And in the distance, she could see soldiers in unfamiliar uniforms, tanks with stars painted on their sides. She should have felt terror. But as she watched the end approach, she felt something unexpected. A strange, exhausted peace. Whatever happened next, the waiting was over. She went back down and told the others what she had seen. How long? Herr Zimmermann asked. Hours, maybe less. Then we face it together, Ilse
They're
said.
here!
Whatever
they saw
comes.
Us.
The
How long
soldiers
do we
came at
have?
dawn.
Hours?
Margaret had not slept.
Less?
She had spent the night watching the candlelight
what
flicker
comes for
across the
us,
faces of her
We
companions,
face it together.
memorizing them as if this
Now
might be her last chance to see
always.
them. Herr Zimmermann, who had become like a brother to her. Frau Müller, whose steady hands had healed so many. Gerda and Otto Hartmann, who had found a reason to keep living despite losing everything. Renate, the librarian who had saved nothing but herself and somehow made peace with that. And her mother, Ilse, whose stories had kept their spirits alive through the darkest nights. These were the people she loved. Whatever happened next, she would face it for them. The first sound was footsteps above, heavy boots on rubble, voices shouting in a language none of them understood. Then silence. Then more footsteps coming closer, descending the stairs. Margaret positioned herself at the door, the others behind her. Her heart was racing, but her hands were steady. She had decided she would not cower, would not beg. She had survived too much to surrender her dignity now. The door opened and light flooded in. Daylight, she realized. The first real daylight she had seen in days. A soldier stood silhouetted against it, rifle raised, his face invisible against the glare. For a long moment, nothing happened. The world seemed to hold its breath. Margaret could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the tension radiating from the people behind her, could almost taste the fear in the air.
Стоп!
Then
Всё
the
в порядке.
soldier lowered his
Идите
weapon
сюда.
slightly and called something
Идите.
over his
Мы
shoulder.
поможем.
More
Всё в
soldiers
порядке.
appeared,
Идите.
peering at the frightened civilians, their expressions unreadable.
Nur Zivilisten
The first
hier?
soldier tried broken
Ja,
German.
nur Zivilisten.
Zivilisten? Nur Zivilisten? Yes.
You are taking
Margaret
away
said,
our mothers,
her voice
our
steadier than she
fathers.
felt.
They are not animals.
Only
They are
civilians.
civilians.
Women
We
and
are
old men.
civilians.
No
Don't take
soldiers,
us.
No weapons. We are not
We
your
are not
enemies.
your enemies.
We are just trying to survive.
We are just trying to
He studied her
survive.
face for what felt like an eternity. She met his gaze without flinching, trying to convey through her eyes what words could not. We are human beings, just like you. We have suffered enough. Then, slowly,
You are coming with
he
us.
nodded.
Thank
He
you.
spoke to his companions in
Thank
rapid
you.
Russian. There was a
Где-то
brief
так?
discussion,
Не похоже.
gestures she
Я
couldn't
думаю, да.
interpret,
Выглядит
tones that
подозрительно.
could have meant anything. Finally, he stepped back
что
from
мы
the
будем
door
делать?
and gestured for them to stay. Wharton,
сыру,
he
сыру.
said. Wait,
Bleiben Sie.
come in later.
Warten Sie bitte.
Bring
Bringen Sie
food.
Essen, später.
And then they were gone, their footsteps receding up the stairs and out into the street. For a moment, no one in the cellar moved or spoke. Then Renate broke the silence. What happened? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret turned to face the others, and she felt tears streaming down her face. Tears she hadn't known she was capable of producing anymore. I think we might be all right. The soldiers did come back, hours later, with food, black bread, tinned meat, and impossibly chocolate. They came with a medic who examined Renate's arm. They came with officers who asked questions through translators. Not everyone in Berlin was so lucky. The stories that emerged were horrific, but for reasons Margaret never fully understood, their group was spared the worst. The war officially ended on the 8th of May. The city was in ruins, but rebuilding had already begun. Rubble women clearing streets, the first tentative
Look at
steps toward a
that.
future. Margaret and her mother
can't
emerged
believe
from the
it.
cellar on a warm May morning, blinking in the sunshine. The building
We
was
made
badly
it.
damaged, but still standing.
We
Ilse began to cry, not with despair, but with exhausted joy.
it.
We made it, she whispered. We actually made it. Margaret put her arm around her mother, feeling the fragile bones beneath the thin skin, and for the first time in months, allowed herself to believe in tomorrow. The days that followed were a blur of relief and grief, of gratitude and guilt. They emerged from their hiding place to find a city transformed, not by rebuilding, but by the sheer magnitude of destruction revealed in daylight. Mountains of rubble stretched in every direction. The smell of smoke and decay hung in the air. Survivors wandered through the streets like ghosts, searching for loved ones, for food, for any sign of the life they had known before. Margareta volunteered with the rubble women, the Trümmerfrauen, who formed human chains to clear the debris brick by brick. It was backbreaking work, but it gave her purpose. Each brick removed was a small victory against despair. Each street cleared was a step toward a future she was only beginning to believe was possible. She thought often of Wilhelm Brandt, the stranger who had helped her save her mother. She never learned what became of him. Perhaps he survived the final battle, perhaps he didn't. but his kindness had rippled outward in ways he could never have imagined. Because of him, Ilsa had lived. Because Ilsa had lived, her stories had kept hope alive in the cellar. And because hope had survived, 8 people had found the strength to face each new day. That was the arithmetic of compassion, Margaret realized. One small act of kindness, multiplied by circumstance, could save not just one life, but many. It was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her days. Margaret found the letter among her mother's things after Ilsa passed away in 1952, at 85, in her sleep, in the apartment they had rebuilt together. It was dated January 1945. If you are reading this, then the worst has happened, and I am no longer here. I have lived a long life, full of joy and sorrow.
If my
And if my death has come during this terrible winter, I want whoever survives to know this. Do not let the cold win. Do not let the hatred and fear take root in your hearts. Remember that we are all connected, all part of the same human family.
My daughter
Margaret is the bravest person I have ever known.
She stayed when she could have
with
fled.
me when she could have fled.
Mother's pride
If she
reaching
has
across
survived,
death.
tell her I was proud of her every moment.
Live fully.
Tell her to live fully,
deeply,
to
never
love
forget
deeply,
what we endured,
to never
but
forget what
let
we
it
endured,
define her.
but never let it define her. And if you are a stranger reading this among the ruins, there was beauty here once. There was music and laughter. We were human, and we deserved better than this. Remember us kindly, and if you have the chance to choose between kindness and cruelty, between hope and despair, choose life. Every time, until your last breath. With all my love, for all time,
No, no.
Ilsa Brenner
I
Vogler.
don't want to be
Margaret Vogler lived until
Madame Liberty won't
1989, long enough to see the wall come down. In the decades between the war's end and that historic night, she rebuilt her life piece by piece. She returned to teaching music, first in makeshift classrooms among the ruins, then in proper schools as the city rose from the ashes. She never remarried. Friedrich remained the love of her life, his memory a companion that never faded. But she was not lonely. She had students who adored her, neighbors who became friends, and the deep satisfaction of knowing she had survived something that should have been unsurvivable. She kept in touch with some of her cellar family over the years. Frau Müller became the head nurse at a rebuilt hospital and often visited for tea and memories. Renate the librarian eventually helped establish a new university library, and she would send Margaret books as gifts on her birthday. The others scattered, as survivors do, but the bonds formed in that dark place never fully dissolved. On the night the wall fell, November 9th, 1989,
outside, my dear.
Margaret
Look
was
at the
97
people.
years old,
They're
living in a
doing it.
nursing home in
They're
what had been
finally
West
doing
Berlin.
it.
A nurse helped her to the window, where she could see the celebrations in the streets below, people embracing, champagne flowing, tears of joy mixing
knew
with
it would
tears for
happen
all the years
someday.
of separation. I
Walls
knew it would
always
happen
come down
someday,
in the end.
she said, her voice thin but clear. I knew the walls would come down. They always do, in the end. The nurse asked her what she meant. Margaret smiled, thinking of another wall,
There are
the
many
invisible
kinds of
one
walls.
that had separated
ones
hope
of
from
concrete,
despair in the
easiest
winter
to
of
tear down.
1945.
Ones we build in hearts
There are many
harder,
kinds of walls,
but
she
they
said.
all fall
The
eventually.
ones made of concrete
If
are
we
the
keep
easiest to
believing
tear
they
down. The ones we build in our hearts are harder, but they all fall eventually, if we keep believing they will. She died 3 months later, in her sleep, with a smile on her face. Those who knew her story said she had been waiting for that moment, waiting to see hope win one more time before she left. The wooden box with her treasures, the ring recovered after the war when the black market dealer was arrested and his goods returned, her parents' wedding photograph, her mother's letter, passed first to a distant cousin, then to a museum dedicated to preserving the stories of ordinary Berliners during the war. The letter from Ilsa is now displayed behind glass, where visitors from around the world can read it and remember. Many of them cry when they reach the final lines. Many of them leave messages of their own, small notes of gratitude and solidarity with a woman they never knew but somehow feel connected to. And on cold January nights, when the wind howls through Berlin's rebuilt streets and the temperature drops toward freezing, some say you can still feel the presence of those who survived that terrible winter, not as ghosts, but as something more like guardians, watching over the city they refuse to abandon, reminding everyone who passes through that the human spirit, like the city itself, can endure almost anything, if only we choose to face it together. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, take care of each other. And remember, no winter lasts forever.